Hello and welcome back to Spatial Spectacle with Stephanie. I'm back with Dorian of Temple Vespera Stella, a new form of Luciferianism and creator of the channel Cipher Grove. Hope you enjoy our chat.
So it's
Yeah,
really it's a pleasure to have you on, Dorian. Thank you very
thank you.
much.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. And I actually met you at an expo not too long ago. I
Oh,
was trying to, canvas and find some vendors for my event coming up in July, which I will touch more on later. I would rather talk about you today. Um, but it was just such a pleasure to sit down and talk to you. I felt a real, connection, and I really, really appreciate what you're doing on your path over there.
yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I had fun. The expo is always a good time. And it was good meeting you. Yeah, we had some really good conversations.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Let's start at the beginning of your spiritual journey and kind of the, you know, Spark Notes version.
Yeah.
I'm aging myself saying stuff like that, to be honest, but go
Yeah,
on.
yeah. Well, to it's hard to kind of pinpoint a beginning because there were a lot of things that kind of happened at different points or kind of came together at different points. So it was just kind of like a sporadic, periodic build up to kind of where I am now. But like I told you before, I was raised in a very Christian, very religious household. Which that did kind of play into my beliefs later, and because we all have somewhere we come from, and that very much contributes to our spirituality and what we grow into. And that definitely had an impact. But there were a lot of things that kind of led me onto other paths later. But I was throughout much of my younger life, especially in early college, I was a pastor. I was a preacher, an evangelist. I taught Sunday school. I counseled different people. I preached pretty much every week almost. There was a lot of things that I did that I was busy with. So ministering, from a Christian perspective was really where I started on at least on like my my main spiritual, my public spiritual journey, so to speak. Um, and that kind of changed a couple years in. Basically, when I started having a lot of, well, for one thing, I was kind of overworked by everything that was going on, overworked with the ministry and everything. So I was kind of already exhausted. But also, I was having a lot of these really intellectual issues with some of the things I was preaching and some of the things that I had been taught all my life growing up, that this is the way, this is how we believe, this is, where you came from, where you're going, and that sort of thing. And I started because I studied very deeply into the Bible. It wasn't just something, I wasn't just a pastor or a preacher that just kind of passively did things. I put my entire being into it. And so I studied religiously, the Bible. I studied it with obsessively. I studied Greek, I studied Hebrew, I studied like the historical roots of the Bible, where all these different stories came from, where all these peoples were that wrote them, and what they were intending to mean, and who they wrote them for, and just all these real complicated, messy historical things. And it just kind of led me down all these different rabbit holes that took me all these different places, and it took me so far away from what I had been taught when I grew up. And then as I was going through a lot of these rabbit holes, I was noticing a lot of different kinds of like injustice within the church, a lot of people being taken advantage of, a lot of people being abused, a lot of people, not necessarily in one church or in just my church, or it was in the region, it was everywhere, it was in all these different local churches, it was on a national scale, it's on a global scale. And I just kind of became convinced that I needed to kind of step away for a little bit to reevaluate what I believe in and reevaluate if this is really what I stand for. Because I just could not stomach some of the things that I was helping to perpetuate in some of people's lives. Now, I always had good intentions, of course, but within Christianity, and there are, of course, good forms of Christianity. There's good Christians. I'm friends with many good, loving Christians that I love dearly. But within just like the religious system, especially just kind of the way it's been translated over time, there's just kind of this like baked in system that enables pain and enables people to be taken advantage of and enables all these different harmful things, whether intentionally or intentionally. I don't know, but the fact is it's there, and I just couldn't live with that anymore. So I started kind of studying some of the more esoteric parts of Christianity and other religions. I just kind of studied anything I could get my hands on. I was just voraciously hungry for knowledge. And around that time, I started having really weird spiritual experiences, which I talk a lot about in my videos, and I won't go too in depth into those. But I was having a lot of these really weird out of body experiences, a lot of really weird experiences that were making me think I was kind of going crazy around this time. And I started actually like seeking a therapist because I thought I was like losing my mind. And she tested me for all kinds of different things. And I thought I was going schizophrenic, but she assured me I was not becoming schizophrenic through some of these like weird visions and things I was having. And then, right around the time this was all happening, I met my mentor, Rose Rozier, who you had on your channel before. And she really mothered me, and she really took me in and like told me what was happening to me, kind of explained there's all this other mumbo jumbo going on around you. It's like the red pill or the blue pill in the Matrix. You take
Mm-hmm.
your eyes are open to everything that's out here beyond. And she really kind of counseled me through a lot of these rapid changes that were happening in my life. And I was, beginning to see spirits and see things that I had only, if I did ever believe they were real, I always believed, they were wrong, or you should never contact them. You should never interact with them, because, the one and only God is the only person you should ever contact. And so she kind of explained a lot of this to me. And then she began to like teach me different things that she had learned from her mentors, like Raymond Buckland. She studied under him for a long time. So it really was like looking back, that was a real honor to have kind of inherited some of his lessons almost directly, from him through her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
she's brilliant. And the fact that she's intuitive too, she's very, Rose came here to be a teacher,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's very evident, and she knows exactly, you know, and sometimes I'll go back and I'll listen to our conversations that we had, and it's like, that message really wasn't meant for me then, but it is for me now. And
Yeah, yeah,
but time is an illusion and such.
yeah,
But anyway,
yeah.
I completely understand. She's, very brilliant.
She is. Yeah, she is truly. I mean, she's mystical. She is. She truly is.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I still go back and listen to. Sometimes I'll record readings, that she does for me, and I'll go back and listen. And something that didn't apply to me now, didn't apply to me then, definitely applies to me now. So it's crazy how that works.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, but then of course she kind of taught me how to kind of take the reins of my life into my own hands and make my own spiritual decisions and kind of decide what I wanted to believe in. And eventually that led me down different roads of paganism. That led me down a little bit of Wicca, a little bit of like ceremonial magic, a little bit of like this and that. But then like my true interest was always in, and I mean, this comes from childhood. This isn't just something that formed as a like an anti-Christian thing, but it was something that I was obsessed with as a kid, as long as I could remember, and I just kind of suppressed it. But I was always interested in like spirits and demons and the devil and that kind of stuff. So it did lead me down to like a more satanic path. Now that's not what people think it is, and it's not as scary as what people think it is. It's not violent. It's not any of. There's so many misconceptions as to what a Satanist is, and also what a Satanist is not. But but it led me down that path, and I really dug deep into like the shadow side of spirituality, because we have we have a public side, a light side, everybody talks about, your highest good, your highest love, your highest self, that kind of stuff. But nobody ever talks about the shadow side of who you are, that inner villain that we all definitely have within us. And like take root in that and learn from that. And that kind of brought me where I am now.
And I love that because, if you suppress that, the more that you suppress your quote unquote shadow side, and I don't really look at my shadow side or my quote unquote villain eras that I have had, those instances or experiences were very much me setting boundaries,
Yeah,
and protecting myself, sometimes protecting myself from myself too.
absolutely.
It's multifaceted. But you know, we're we live in a dualistic world, and it's just kind of delusional to think that it's, if you only are in the light, then your life is always going to be positive. Um, because it's just not the way it's really set up, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, um, in these spirits, these energies, they make up a very wide spectrum of our our here reality, and our reality is beyond the veil.
Yeah.
And sometimes if that's floats your goat, then go that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was telling you last
But
time,
yeah.
if you go into a room and if you leave that room and you turn the light off, it doesn't make that room evil. It's just the absence of light. And everything in the universe exists in a natural state of darkness. The only reason that we even have light on Earth to begin with is because of the sun, because one distant star so far away happens to shed its light on our planet, periodically. Combination of that and, fire or electricity or whatever. But basically, that's where light for us comes from. And
Hmm.
so when you consider the vastness of the universe, there's only a tiny, tiny percentage that is even touched by light. And so it's not a question of, dark is so evil and, things that live in darkness are so evil. It's just that they exist in a part of the world that we have less exposure to because we've evolved to be asleep during that time. We've evolved to be asleep during darkness. So, and our brains are naturally programmed to fear the unknown. So we naturally fear the things that are in the more unknown part of life, the night, the dark, whatever. And so I kind of went through this ravenous curiosity of wanting to know what was in that place, that darkness, whatever, because I didn't want to form an opinion of it based on what people had told me. I wanted to work with it, to learn from it, to see what I could see, and not necessarily I wanted to learn, anything evil or anything bad, but I wanted to learn what is the shadow side of this world of myself. I wanted to be able to, and like you said, it's not always like being villainous or anything. Sometimes it's being just autonomous. It's taking individuality. It's expressing that. It's laying boundaries in your life, doing things that other people normally think is very, very selfish. But for you, that's self care. That's work. That's building your life, making things secure. And we just kind of live in this very collectivistic society where those kinds of things are frowned upon. And for me, my path was very much cutting through the noise of, feeling guilty for not helping somebody else or not, overextending myself for somebody else. And instead feeling proud that I had done what was needed to be done for me so that then I could help somebody else.
Yes,
You can't give.
absolutely. Yes, you can't pour from an empty cup. Like it's literally impossible. And I think that that's the biggest misconception of just that duality, or I don't know, the in the Bible, the way that you're meant to be in poverty and be meek and all
Self-denial.
of these things. Yes. And it's just like, I don't vibe with that. Like, I think that mediums, like mediums, intuitive, psychics, energy healers, all these people deserve to get paid, you know?
Yeah,
That's not bad. And like you were saying, it's all energy. And if you don't have the energy to be helpful at that time, you're
yeah,
probably going to make it worse, you know?
exactly. Yeah. We like to put our own interpretations on energy, but at the end of the day, energy doesn't care. It's just energy. It's no different than the law of gravity. It's going to do what it's going to do, whether you like it or not, whether you think that's evil or whether you think that's good. And that sounds silly that we're making that kind of comparison, but that's what people are doing. That's the kind of interpretations people are putting on energy, on belief, on all this kind of stuff. Because I think this stuff is no more unnatural than gravity. It's just in a way that we can't quantifiably explain with our modern science, or anything like that. Uh, but yeah, it all comes down to just our interpretation.
Yeah, because then you have the people that are like into, well, these are just stories that we're told, it's mythology, these entities, these deities, these, spirits, they are not real. Where's the proof? I just honestly don't think that we have the science to the
Yeah,
way that we science is not going to prove it, period. It's just not going to, you
exactly.
know.
Yeah, and like I told you last time, I mean, I have no objection to the idea that a lot of this stuff is real. It's not just something that is just believed in, or that's a folk tale, fairy tale, myth, whatever. I mean, some of it, yes, is, and some of it
Yeah,
kind of gets lost in human storytelling.
right.
But at the end of the day, energies and spirits and all these different forms of consciousness that exist within our universe, I believe that they're absolutely real because, and like I've told you different stories before about, uh, I call it the moment of knowing. It's when you have an experience that is beyond anything you can logically wrap your head around. So, a spirit appears in front of you and starts talking to you as physically and as is in your face as you and me right now. It's flesh. It's right there. It's extended out to you. And when stuff like that happens, you go from this kind of even if you honestly believed it was true all your life, it now goes from something that you have just believed in to something that is unequivocally real. And that's the moment of knowing. It goes from faith to knowing. And for a lot
Hmm.
of peoples, these kinds of things, spirits, whatever, they weren't just something to be believed in. They were something that they knew was real. And throughout a practitioner's life, especially if you're somebody like me who actively conjures and works with spirits, you will have many of those moments where your entire concept of reality is just shattered. And it may not appear immediately. It may take months, if not years, of ritual work and of practice and consistency and that kind of thing, using all these different methods to expand your psychic senses. But then once that moment happens, you will never go back. It'll just change your entire psyche. Everything that you thought you knew will just bust. And sometimes that's really dangerous for people. Some people are really scared of that. But if you have the strength to go through it and to be stable through it, that'll make you one of the most powerful people ever.
Yes, and it's important to be grounded and to be grounded in our uh materialistic world. You have to, we are duality as well, you know what I mean? If you're still human on this human journey, and does it'll almost break you down to the
Oh,
point of it's almost impossible to explain, but it makes you question everything,
yeah,
and then realize that everything, it can be true all at once.
Yeah.
You can go down a rabbit hole just, with that, but
Yeah.
it is really important to stay grounded and to understand that you aren't alone either, though. There are more and more people are having these awakenings, and they're all different, which is very interesting to me, and I love it,
Oh, I do too.
because
Yeah.
we all have these different quote unquote awakening experiences of the knowing, and it's been happening a lot more frequently. I've seen, in the greater consciousness and collective of Earth. And so as that happens, I think people are becoming more aware of these different, angels or demons, or, these different beings that aren't just us.
Yeah.
You know? But you're very well read, and it shows in your videos, and I'll link that here. But you have a beautiful audience as well. You have a lot of very supportive
Yeah.
viewers. And let's talk about that online community. Let's talk about your Discord, and where we can further connect. You wrote a book of prayers. Let's start with the Discord thing first, and then we'll talk about your book.
So I think it was about a year, maybe almost 2 years ago, I started a online group called Temple Vespera Stella, which means Temple of the Evening Star. Of course, that's like a reference to Lucifer as the morning and evening star, planet Venus. That's a whole thing. But basically, this temple or this online group, it's just this virtual community where a lot of people from different paths, mainly satanic or Luciferian, or on the left hand path, as we call it. A lot of people from this kind of side of the spiritual community have come together in this little community that we've built. And we're all just kind of bouncing ideas off each other, learning, exchanging information, that kind of thing. Um, and it's really turned into a really, really great community. And I've learned a lot from all of them on there. We have around 350 members on the Discord now, I think. So it's grown really, really nicely.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, it's really I love it there. I mean I'm so proud of that community. But we have that. Of course, we have a website that kind of tells it has a little bit of like an frequently asked questions and different things that are about our group, about things that our members believe in. So we have that. We also have the YouTube, which is where I just kind of put forth just different lines of thinking that people, questions that people have about Satanism, spirits, the left hand path, that kind of stuff. I spend time just kind of answering and doing like deep studies about where different ideas came from, where different deities come from, that kind of thing. So it's all just kind of come together into this little online community. But I've been very, very blessed to have such an amazing support system online from everybody. And
I really do enjoy the fact that these covens are like popping up online, and the ball really started rolling during the shutdowns.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like, okay, well, if we can't hang out in person, I guess we'll all convene
yeah.
in Discord.
Yeah. And then in some ways the pandemic it was awful, but it produced a few useful things. And
Yeah.
that was one of them. It just kind of like developed the online world so much more. And we were able
Hmm.
to connect in ways that we never had before. And I also think that the pandemic was partly responsible for a lot of like these spiritual awakenings like you've talked about. I think
Hmm.
all this like the negative energy that was the pandemic, just all like the globe, all this energy broke something out in the spiritual world, let all this energy come through, so it's really interesting. But
It was bizarre. I felt that too. That is an interesting way to put it. I
yeah,
really feel you. Yeah.
yeah, there was this very heavy, it was fear, it was negativity, all just bad energy, and it just shattered something, a veil, I don't know, but whatever happened, it changed the whole population of the world, I think. And
Yeah.
now a lot more of awakenings and that kind of stuff. But yeah, my community, we that's kind of where we come from. We have a lot of people online that are we're working toward different things. We're working toward right now a physical location, so like a building that we can use as kind of like a temple, or I don't want to call it a church, but kind of like just a center for religious ceremony, religious experience, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. But that's probably much further down the road. Who knows? Maybe a couple years. But that's one of our long-term goals, is to create something of that nature. So we're just kind of creating different spaces online for people of the left hand path to gather and learn, because there's so few places out there for that. But yeah,
Yes, I agree. I agree. And I think that that's why there's a lot of misconceptions about, people on that path, on that journey. And I mean, for the longest time, I really thought, oh my gosh, Lucifer. I mean, but I grew up Christian. I was, baptized Methodist. And before they got like real anti, whatever,
yeah.
we all we all have our, dark and light. But anyway,
I
and
bet.
I don't want to, whatever. But
Yeah,
whenever I heard stuff like that, but a part of me, it was interesting to say, like, when I was a kid, oh, I was really interested in demons and spirits and
yeah,
ghosts and goblins and literally anything
yeah,
other than,
yeah. Me too. Yeah, yeah. And I saw things,
that's,
things that
yeah.
like,
And I would see weird stuff my whole life. I've seen like a bunny turn into like a brown, I don't know, I think it was a brownie. I have no idea. It was wild.
when I was a
I'm
kid,
like,
I
are
saw,
there fae in Ohio?
yeah. I bet it tasted good. But I have a story that I always tell people about when I was a kid, and this kind of makes me think, when I was little, I had some kind of ability to see spirits, but when I got older, I just kind of brushed it off as it was like an imaginary friend. It was just something my mind like projected, so I never really told anybody about it. But when I was little, my mom would take me to. She had this friend that lived in Kentucky, and she had this big, beautiful house, and they were renovating the basement for something. And I remember I would kind of sneak off, and I would go down the steps, down this rickety stairwell down into this basement. And I remember there being like cinder blocks and wood and like tools and stuff everywhere. But there was this one corner. This was a big basement. Like, you could go down all these different rooms. But I went down this room, and in this one corner, there was always this man that stood there. And he had this real long, like black trench coat and a hat. It was like a top hat. And
Ooh, you saw the Hat
yeah, well, some people,
Man.
which I don't know, because he was kind of different from the Hat Man, from what I've read or seen about him, but also he was kind of like similar. I don't know. It could have been him, but he had this big top hat, and he had these big, like, they were almost like when you shine a light and you see an animal's eyes in the dark. They were almost these like luminous, kind of like red, yellow, amber looking eyes. And he had this big old smile, and he had these huge long fingers. So when I was little and I would like draw him or something, I would call him Mr. Fingers. And I would go down there, though, when my mom was when she took me over, and I would go down there, and I would bring like my toys, like my little dinosaur toys, and I would sit there and play. And I remember this man sitting there and like just crouching and playing with me, and I thought he was just a person that lived in the house. And when I got older, I realized that, oh, that was probably an imaginary friend. He wasn't real. He wasn't actually there. But then when I came into this part of my spirituality, I realized, oh, crap, like that was probably a real spirit or something. So
Hmm.
different little things like that. And it's crazy how and Rose always tells me it's because kids just came from the afterlife. So they're a
Hmm.
lot fresher. They haven't been programmed and conditioned by this world so much yet. So
Right.
they still have that part that can see and can perceive beyond, the veil. And so it's very interesting when I hear things about like little kids seeing things. It's fascinating to me.
Hmm. It really is. And it's funny because I had an experience where I did some shrooms and I reconnected with my childhood imaginary friend.
Yeah.
And it was And I like immediately knew. I was like, oh my gosh, that's my friend, you know? Like he anyway, I really don't want to go into that story because there was some stuff too that was like that dealt with another thing that I don't want to go into today. But anyway,
Right.
it just was like I went and I was like talking to my dad and I was kind of telling my dad about it and I'm like, you did I ever have like an imaginary friend? And he's like, oh yeah, a lot of them. I'm like, oh, a lot of them.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. Yeah,
But I realized that I had like forgotten in like that little it it was like fuzzy. It's like a little fuzzy bean. Um, I don't know what it is, to be honest. I don't know if I ever named it or anything, but it was just one of those like knowings of just like, oh shit, like
yeah,
we used to be friends when I was like 3 or 4 years old.
yeah. Where you been?
Right. And then I forgot. I got programmed
Yeah,
to forget. But yeah, I just find that very interesting. But going back to like the misconceptions that recovering Christians even have, you know,
yeah,
because my main goal is to be open-minded and to I love hearing other people's perspectives of spirituality, the occult, you know, their journey. It's all very fascinating to me too. But it kind of I realized that I was like preparing for our interview and like listening to your podcast and I was like kind of getting like these program triggers like oh like he said Lucifer like a lot like you know what I mean like I just felt
yeah,
that part of me being like woo woo you know so and for what you know I know better like I
yeah.
have educated myself to know a little bit better but can you explain to like a layman that what your perspective of that may be and how did you like cross into that where you just like oh I went on this I started researching demons and then I started meeting them or was it
Yeah.
very much intentional?
Um, it was it was partially intentional, but partially accidental. Because, like I said, I was going into different forms of paganism, and I was just kind of studying all over the place, and I just wanted to find something that stuck, and something that I could just kind of hang on to for a while. I because once one belief structure that you've had for so long just kind of falls apart, your life and your mind just kind of becomes so chaotic that you just want to find something that's kind of stable and that you can just kind of rest in because it's mentally exhausting
Mhm.
to go from place to place to place to place, even just mentally, in belief. So, and it wasn't necessarily that I was looking for something to replace Christianity, but I was just looking for some deeper truth that I could rest in, if that makes sense. And I first I worked with Hecate. She was really like one of the first entities that I worked with because she wasn't a demon. She wasn't. She was very much outside all these other traditions and outside all these other like mainstream belief. She was a Hellenistic and Greek deity, and she kind of presided over both the good and the bad. And she taught me a lot of things about that. So she was kind of one of the first main entities that I worked with. And as I began to work with her, and I kind of did a lot of like self work, and a lot of that involved like what we call shadow work, which is kind of healing and kind of not necessarily getting rid of, parts of us that we think are negative, but like kind of coming,
Integrating that
yeah,
transmuting that you know
and because I always say, are you a good person because you just don't do anything bad? Or are you a good person because you know you are capable of doing horrible things and you don't do them? A lot of Christians, they are only Christians because they're afraid of hell. Well, if we took hell away, would any of them still be Christian? If would any of them truly that always is something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. Are you a good person because you are genuinely a good person? You know the evil that is within every human being, including yourself. And you can use that evil for good things. You can not necessarily, that kind of sounded weird, but you can use that part, that villainous part of you stronger and to do things that people normally think is evil, because good and evil are very ambiguous, arbitrary terms. They can mean different things. But you can use what you think is evil within you to kind of better yourself, because that may be different than, because what you think is evil within you may be something that other people don't think. That's kind of a tangent. But anyways,
again, perspective.
Perspective, yeah. So it's really like I was coming to terms with all the things that I thought for so many years were evil about myself that really weren't, looking back. All these things about like self-denial, and you have to do this and you have to do that. And if you don't do this, you're evil. And if you don't do this, and if you do this, you're evil. And I just started breaking down those barriers. Like I said, you can use evil for your personal betterment to grow yourself. And again, arbitrary terms. But anyways, so that kind of led me down looking into demons, because I was beginning to really like tap into what I thought was good and evil, what I thought was right and wrong, that kind of thing. And I was really redefining a lot of these terms, which really, when you go into the Bible, that's exactly what happened in Genesis. When humans, Adam and Eve, took from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they were redefining for themselves they were discovering what evil is. They were redefining morality. They were redefining their place in the universe. And when Lucifer, or Satan, or whatever you want to call him, the serpent, offered that fruit to Eve, he said, God doesn't want you to have this, because you will be like him and you will know good and evil. You will be like God. And so the whole path of, I don't want to say the whole path, but most of the path of Satanism and this kind of left-hand path, like direction, is very much self-deification. So learning that you are a god, and it's not in like a prideful, egotistical sense, but and it's not necessarily like I am the creator of the universe. It's that we are all inherently God. We all have godhood within us. We all have divinity. And it is that respect of my divinity and your divinity that is what Satanism really is. But also, and I believe theistically. So there's atheistic Satanists and there's theistic Satanists. Atheistic Satanists are typically what you see in like Anton LaVey's Church of Satan, the Satanic Temple, those kind of people. And they have really good, I believe differently than them, but I agree with a lot of their like moral ideas. But
same.
I believe theistically, so that there is a spiritual reality, that there are spirits, there are, other things going on unseen, but I believe that everything comes from the original source of all. So, you can call that God, you can call that the Big Bang, you can call that whatever you want to call it. It's the source. It was the first singular, it is the singularity, the first time something was something, and it emanated into everything else. And so I believe that we are all a part of this original source. We are all a part of the totality of everything. And that includes angels, that includes demons, that includes gods, that, heaven and hell and all these other things. They are all a part of this totality. They're all a part of this source. They're just different expressions and different faces of this source. There are some interpretations of different, like, esoteric traditions that say, that the supreme God is the God that sits behind all of our faces, that looks through all of our eyes. So we are all this one God. We're just wearing different faces. And it's the ego that forms in our brain that makes us forget that we are not the same person. So you and I, it's our egos that makes us forget that we are actually the same person, that we're actually the same person sitting here having a conversation with itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just playing a game with itself. It's learning through experience. It's just it's a big drama. It's a play. It's a game. And there's this one there's this Pixar short that I remember growing up, and I can't remember what it's called, but it was at the end of like so many like old VHS tapes of Pixar, and it showed this old man with a chessboard, and he would sit there and he would like play one side, and then he'd go to the other side of the table and he'd play the other side, and he would like laugh at himself and like play these different sides of himself. That's basically what the universe is. It's this one thing that is everything, and it's playing all these different roles, and just all the chaos in the universe and all the things that we go through. It's this God, this source, testing things off itself. So demons, Lucifer, all those things are very much an expression of that. And it's the expression that our ego tries to hide, tries to suppress, because it's foreign, it's weird, it's, taboo. We don't want to mess with that because society at large says it's wrong. We've kind of built this like almost a society ego. So there's all these different things that go into it. And I believe in that, and I believe in a lot of like Gnostic ideas. So I got really into that, and that's a whole other thing. But I kind of mix that with what I believe in. So my belief is very eclectic, and it borrows from a lot of different traditions, a lot of different pagan practices, and just a lot of different areas in history. And that has kind of turned into what my path is now. And that's kind of what I talk about in my channel. I just kind of grab things from all over and say, hey, here, this all kind of matches up. This is a pattern I'm seeing. That's basically what my channel is. But yeah, essentially.
I love that. And I think that I don't know. I think that a lot of people have a hard time understanding we all are the same energy. We've like splintered ourselves off to play
Yeah.
out this game, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I think that kind of is something that, can break your mind in half, a million different pieces. So,
The devil,
um,
I see the devil very much as this part of, and I don't want to just make it sound like it's a mental thing, because I very much believe that the devil is a real entity, or entities, I should say. But he very much represents this kind of, it's like a stumbling block, and you trip over it, but then you learn not to trip over it again. You kind of learn from it. So he is, and Satan in Hebrew originally meant just adversary, and it wasn't tied to Lucifer or any one deity. In the original Hebrew scriptures, anything could be a Satan, and that just meant an enemy, an opponent. A human could be a Satan. And so the adversary, it's just kind of this force that triggers your growth, your progress. It tests you, it challenges you, and you like evolve into something new from the adversary. And that's basically what my path is like pointed toward. It's this embracing of the adversary, so that through the challenges that I'm faced through him, I can grow. I can become a better, more powerful person in whatever ways that means. But just like in the old like rabbinical texts, and in the Talmud, and in a lot of these old like Judaic scriptures, Satan, the chief of Satan's, was this entity named Samael, and he sat on God's council, and he was an angel, but he was the chief of Satan's in this one tradition. And he was basically like, I mean, he controlled the demons. He did all these different things with like all the dark forces in the universe, but it still served the purpose of exposing our weaknesses, exposing the things that weigh us down, that keep us from growing. And so it was very much this kind of trial type of spirit. And but he still sat on the divine council with God. And even Isaiah 45:7 in the Bible, it's God saying, he says, I am the light and the dark. I cause good and create evil. And it says that. I love throwing that scripture out at people when they're like, say blah blah blah. I'm like, well, it says in the Bible that God created evil. It's not just evil happened. People like to use the argument that God never created evil. God never, blah blah blah. It says right in your book, God created evil for a purpose.
so what do you say regarding the interpretations of the Bible and the use of it as a weapon for different cultures? Like, I know that it's, several different texts, several different parts of, several different cultures, several different people wrote and
Yeah.
contributed. When you were going down that rabbit hole, what did you find to be most like, oh my, like I had this notion, but in reality, it's this, you know?
So, well, one of the big things was that all the books in the Bible were not written and were not intended to be compiled into one big book. So, when you read the Bible, the best way to read it is not as one singular book, but as a library of books from the Hebrew traditions. Because that's where all the contradictions and stuff, there's some things in the Bible you just can't reconcile, no matter how many mental loops and cross referencing and linguistic tracing you do. There's some things that just don't line up, and I mean, and you can do all the mental backflips you want to do, and I mean, cool, whatever,
It's
but that doesn't
exhausting. It's exhausting.
historically accurate, and I did that as a
Yeah.
preacher. Would find a verse that would conflict with another verse, and then I would go searching for another verse that reconciled the two, or I would have to find some way to make them make sense with each other. I'd have to form some narrative or reframe stuff, and that's not what the Bible was intended to do. All these books were meant for different cultures at different times in history and for different purposes. They were either letters, they were historical books, they were that they had all these different purposes. They were not meant to be put into one supreme book for one supreme religion. That really did not come until, I mean, thousands of years later in Hebrew and Israelite history, when Rome and all these other like big imperial nations came into play, and they wanted to control people, and so they took these different lists of canonical books, put them together, and created, oh, here's a holy scripture, follow it or we will execute you, that kind of thing. And so, I mean, even Yahweh, who is according to Christians, the God of the Bible, Yahweh was a deity within the Canaanite pantheon, and he served under El, who was one of like the supreme deities in the Canaanite pantheon. And those two got kind of pulled out of that pantheon, and like they had what was called the cult of El and the cult of Yahweh, and they kind of formed into the Israelite nation. We have all these mythic stories about how the Israelites came out of Egypt and through the 10 plagues and the Pharaoh and Moses and all that kind of stuff, parted the Red Sea, and I mean, those are all very cool and interesting. And Exodus is one of my favorite books. I mean, I love the story, just as a story. But there's no archaeological evidence that even points to there being an Israelite habitation within Egypt. They don't have any. It would show in the architecture, it would show in the pottery, it would show in like all these different things. There's no evidence that there was any kind of migration or exodus. Even Egyptians had Hebrew slaves. And so, but what there is evidence of is that there was a people group that descended out of the Canaanite region, and the pottery and the architecture does show that and creates the nation of Israel. And so different things like that really blew my mind when I started like really studying scripture. Between that and realizing books that had been written that were removed, like you said, like the books of Enoch, which are one of my and really, I mean, the book of Jubilees, and then there were like the additional books of Moses. There was the life of Adam and Eve, which is another one of my favorites. All these different books, and it really came down to all these different groups of scribes and rabbis and different groups of people that were trying to produce their version of the book to present to the people as a tool for political power. That was mostly what it was, is it was a tool for political power. Like King James, for example. King James, he was competing with, don't quote me on this exactly because my memory is a little fuzzy, but I believe the Geneva Bible was the popular one before him. And he was wanting to compete with that. And he was wanting to create his Bible so that people would follow him and his interpretation and follow his empire and that kind of stuff. So he had his scribes come together and whip up the King James Version. Well, there's all kinds of evidence that they omitted verses, that they, rewrote verses, that they added verses. Like the verse it's in one of the Gospels, and it says, it's talking about demon possession, and it says that a certain type of demon can only be cast out through prayer and fasting. That was never in the original Hebrew and Greek scriptures. That was deliberately added by King James and his scholars into the Bible. So, I mean, there's another thing about demons, that that just it's not true.
So that is crazy. First of all, I am learning every day, and I love that for me, but that is just, I mean, I knew that King James and his scribes were out here doing the most, which is fine. If I were a king, I was trying to do all that shit, I would be doing the same thing,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I guess I did.
King James he was an interesting guy, but he also wrote books of witchcraft and books for pagans. So it wasn't like he was some great Christian king. He was just writing books for the people that he wanted to follow him, and did. And I mean, he didn't care about what these books said or what he didn't believe in them. I mean, the script. I mean, not to get like political, but I mean the scriptures that talk about like homosexuality and like how it's an abomination. So King James was a very known homosexual man, and so he was the one who instructed some of these scribes to put those translations in there, and it was
That's
not
deep. King
yeah,
James was oh, that's deep.
yeah. He was buried with one of his male lovers. I mean, he had a wife, but he was very known
Well,
for
they all
his
had wives back then,
yeah. Yeah, he did whatever he had to do to pass on the lineage, But yeah, he was very promiscuous, and he was buried with one of his male lovers, and so
That's
it just
amazing.
used different things in the Bible, and not just that, but there's so many different things in the book of Leviticus and in some of these Old Testament scriptures that people nowadays they pick out and they use it as a weapon. And the thing about the Bible is it's so big and so vast and so vague that you can argue into the Bible whatever interpretation you want to read out of it,
It's true.
because
I've
the way
done
that,
it.
yeah, exactly. And the way that people interpreted the same scriptures, 100 years ago, totally different than how we do now. And it's just all about how society decides, arbitrarily what we want to read out of the Bible, what we want to say it says. It has nothing to do with what it actually on paper says, but what society thinks it says, what society says it says, this kind of implicit layer to Christianity. Um, that's where we get into a lot of trouble. And so my path has just been about, for one thing, learning what the original texts actually said and taking them for whatever wisdom they're worth, but also kind of disseminating and getting rid of a lot of these just weaponized dogmas, and some like some of the teachings of Jesus I firmly agree with. Just the whole be nice to people.
Yeah. I
it,
mean, that's really it, bro.
yeah, yeah, and that's those are rules to live by. But honestly, I don't even know if you brought Jesus back today and you said, this is what people have done with your image. Because even though, there's different scriptures that, where he kind of talks about his divine nature and him coming from the Father and that kind of thing, I almost don't know if I question if he was ever intending for his image to be worshipped, because it seemed to
Right.
me he was more in the business of bringing humanity to a level of raised consciousness. And
Yes.
that is where I want to go. And that's really the message of Lucifer. And that's why I have gravitated toward Lucifer, because Lucifer represents descending on his own accord out of heaven, giving
Mhm.
human. You can interpret heaven as whatever you like, but coming out of heaven, bestowing the fruit of knowledge to humans, that knowledge giving us the autonomy we need to shed the chains of ignorance, move beyond Yahweh, whatever you want to call this God that nowadays poses as the creator of the universe, but it may be just one of many spirits. But anyway, Lucifer very much to me is like Prometheus, who came out of Olympus, gave fire to humans. There's all these different stories. You can think of Athtar in the Mesopotamian uh, myths, or Kingu in the Enuma Elish, which is like about another Mesopotamian mythic cycle. He came out of like the void, the beyond. He was sent by Tiamat, the dragon, and he came down to Earth, and the other gods went to war with him, and they tore him apart, and they used his blood to create humans. There's all these different stories about this deity that descends from the beyond, whatever you want to call it, and gives something to humans, and that something is salvific. It's saving. It's rejuvenating. It's regenerative, and that is to me what Satanism is about. It's about learning this, obtaining this gnosis, this knowledge of what it is to become a god, to be saved, so to speak, not from not from hell, and not from sin, and not from all these other things that Christians interpret as needing to be saved from, but it's being saved from the ignorance that will naturally come without knowledge. Because to me, knowledge leads to love. Knowledge leads to like building things that are better for you, that help increase the wellness of life. And even in the books of Enoch, the watchers, the fallen angels who came out of heaven, they fell in love with humans, and then they taught humans things. They taught humans how to work herbs, how to work iron and metals, and build different things. They taught them about architecture and all these different things that are necessary for survival and for building humanity, civilization. And they were punished for it because Yahweh, or this God, whatever you want to call him, he sends the archangels to chain these watchers and send them into the pit. And to me, that's just a very it's just such a psychological, or just a very meta interpretation of all these things, as there is someone that wants to keep you in ignorance. That may be yourself, that may be another entity, that may be whatever, but it is your job to obtain this wisdom that leads to salvation, and whatever you want to call it, whatever that means to you. And that is the spiritual path that I am on. So more or less. So
I love it. So tell me about your book. Is this just a collection of I have not read your book. I discovered your book today.
Yeah, so it's just a small little, it's more of a pamphlet really than an actual book, but it's on Amazon, and it is a book of prayers to yourself, to entities, to whatever, and they can be used as invocations, they can be used as spells, they can be used however you want to use them. But there are these, just each page is a little prayer, and it has a piece of artwork that I've created with it that you can kind of use for meditative purposes or trance work or whatever. So that's just kind of what it is. Now I am working on a book right now that is more of like a full-fledged book on like my path, different practices, teaching the things that I've learned to other people. I'm working on it right now, and it is called My Friend the Devil. And and it'll be
I love that.
yeah. But it'll be out. I don't have a release date for it yet, but that one's coming soon, and it will kind of have a lot of the things I talk about my channel in it, a lot of like my experiences, and it'll have instructions for rituals, for meditation, for spells, that kind of stuff. And so it can it's kind of the sum of a lot of the things I've been talking about.
I love that. I love that. Good luck in those endeavors. I can't wait to read it because I am just absolutely fascinated. And again, I'm fascinated by different people's perspectives, especially whenever they all kind of come back to that, like, you are on this path, I am on a completely different path. I am very eclectic too. People are very confused about
Yeah,
me, and that's okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Let them use.
Right, like none of your business.
Yeah,
But so what I share, whatever. But I do think that it's really important for us to be open with one another, even if
yeah.
we don't agree. I mean, there's some things that you've said today that maybe I don't agree with, or
All right.
someone who
Absolutely.
watches this. That doesn't mean that you can, come in the comments and be a dickhole. Like,
Right. Yeah.
it's just not
Yeah.
like you can if you want to. You have the freedom to
Yeah.
do that. I would
There's
rather you not.
well,
Right? Like they come for you, bro. They're like,
oh yeah.
listen. And
There's
that
been
happened a lot. It's very interesting to me because that happened a lot whenever I had the Rose City Raven business and was doing a lot of work online and like we would post like just even a reel. And if it was, if someone's, interpretation was different, they would be in the comments, like, first of all, and they would be very like, some people would just be like, this is my opinion, or I've had this experience instead. But some people are like,
Yeah.
just mean, and
Yeah.
that's fine. I really don't let that get to me. At one point, it really did. It
Yeah.
made me like, I
Yeah.
would like cry and like, but
Yeah.
that was like shadow work, part of my shadow self too,
Yeah.
because like I'm kind of a dick too. I say
Yeah.
dick like dicks are bad things. They're not. I'm gonna have to bleep out this whole episode. The whole end is just gonna be like bleep, bleep, bleep,
Yeah. No, I get it. That no, I mean, I've gotten death threats in my comments before, and it's
and it's just like we need to come back when you were discussing like a need to raise the consciousness to be more loving, be more compassionate to one another, because we're not all having the same path. That would be dumb.
yeah, it would absolutely. I agree. Yeah, this needs to convert and to change and to squeeze the world into this one worldview, whatever that may be. It's just it's tiring, and say that works and say you get there. What then? I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of there's a lot of adventure in the chase, in the journey of that, in trying to conquer and trying to bring everybody to one singular idea. But there's no eternal point in that to me. There's nothing that's I mean, and this whole idea of like heaven and hell, like there's some people that probably I don't want to be in heaven with. And
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
don't community as Rose as I've been saying that since she says it a lot.
It's true though. And I think that a lot of people, what's very interesting to me is like people will have these near death experiences and they'll go to the other side and have these experiences with, Jesus, or if they're Buddhist, then they will have or they'll have like their loved ones, or it'll be a light, and like they're
Yeah,
all different experiences
yeah,
when they go back home or go back home to visit, I guess, is
yeah, yeah,
but I think that our souls perception is vastly different from one another. So I maybe I don't know, because a lot of, for a hot second I was like, heaven and hell do not, I don't think they exist, right? I don't think that it exists the way contemporary Christianity has led us to believe.
exactly.
The fire and brimstone or the pearly gates, like
Yeah.
this or that.
Killer
Um, yeah, it's just too much. But I do think that people do pass over and have these experiences on the other side that maybe seem like they, you know, are in hell, because they've created that for themselves because they want to atone for whatever, you know, hateful
Yeah,
shit they did in this life, you know.
yeah, yeah.
I don't
That's
know.
like
I have several questions, and my belief, the way I get there differs, but it
yeah,
all kind of goes back to the same. Your belief of them, there is a source that kind of just,
yeah,
you
yeah. And
know,
I believe in multiple planes of existence. So I believe in heavens, plural, and I believe in hells, plural. But I also believe in all kinds of other, you know, planes. But I always go back to the idea of the underworld. Because in
yeah,
the early Israelite, Hebrew, Judaic, and their interpretations of the scriptures and stuff, there was a place called Sheol, which was basically, it just meant grave, and it was just kind of this shadowy, like murky. It was almost like an inverse, like a reflection of our world, but it was just kind of shadowy because it was just a place of the dead. And that was just where you went. That was where everybody went. It didn't matter if you were good, evil, whatever. And this kind of changed after like the Babylonian exile, when Israel was taken over and they were all led into slavery, And they wanted to have this idea of, okay, well, what's going to happen to all the evildoers in this world? Is there going to be any justice? Because obviously I can't do any justice because I'm a slave. So is God going to do anything? And so it created this whole idea of, well, they're going to be punished in the afterlife because of what they did to me. And that there was this whole just evolution of that religion, and that's where we get a lot of that kind of stuff. Plus, like the New Testament, and then later on in like the Renaissance period, we had Dante's Inferno, which was this it was like a poem, and it was entirely fictional, but it was Dante being led by the spirit of Virgil into hell, and he was like overseeing. It was like a tour of hell. He got to see all the different layers of hell and all the different sinners and all the different demons and stuff, and it was all this fire and brimstone, and that's where a lot of like our modern imagery of hell
Oh,
comes
totally,
from.
100%. That's exactly
Yeah.
where it comes from.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that Paradise Lost, like Paradise Lost is one of my favorites. My cat's name's Milton.
Yeah. Love that. There's some amazing, and it's funny because in Paradise Lost, John Milton did not intend for Satan to be portrayed as like the hero of the story, and people immediately interpreted that into his writing, and it was totally like not what he intended. And
I know, which I love the
yeah,
most because my cat is just, if you met this cat, you would be like, he is just little Milton.
yeah,
Just a little derpy. Like he seems real
yeah,
smart, but he's a little derpy.
yeah, yeah.
Aren't we
Yeah,
all though?
absolutely. Oh,
But yes, I love that. I am really happy to be able to have a chat with you today on my re I don't know, emergence into my podcast, which
yeah,
does not have any sort of schedule. I just do what I want, and
yeah. I have to
sometimes people
say,
watch. And
I hope you keep doing them.
yeah, thank you so much. I was just like doing some like again, you can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So I was doing some um just shifting in the house and in my business and my day to day, and healing and doing that, and like try to like actively heal is also very interesting. It's been like a really welcome change in my life, but I kind of have fallen off, and I'm really glad that we got to have this conversation. And because I really really think that again, it's important for each perspective to be heard, as long as it's from a, you know what I mean, like a place of um
Bits of love and
yes, just love and compassion, and that thirst for knowledge and on the journey is really important to me. And I really caught that whenever we had our conversations, and I look forward to having another conversation. I want to have part two with you, and see where that goes too, because I've
yeah,
gotten like, I want to get your little prayer book, ritual book, whatever, it's
yeah.
all the same.
All the time, yeah.
It's all the same. But anyway, I really appreciate you, and I'm going to put all of your information in um the comments, because the next time I want to chat, I want to talk about like your experience with some of these entities. I want to talk about your experience with like doing psychic readings for people, and how you
Yeah,
got into that and things like that. So there are many topics that you and I can discuss, but I'm really
yeah,
glad that we started where we did, because
yeah,
that's really my loved it. Anyway, I
yeah.
appreciate you, and that's all for now. Thank you for watching.